I want to talk about something I see all the time. Not on CNN or on Fox News, not in a think piece written by someone who's never set foot in the communities they're actually talking about. I mean, around me, the places I grew up, the places I still drive through, the places 15 minutes in any direction from my house. Because if you've spent any amount of time in small town America, then you've probably seen it too. You see towns that used to have things, factories, union jobs, hardware stores, little diners where everyone knew everyone. The kind of jobs where one paycheck could support an entire family. Not a mansion or a yacht, but a life, a very decent one. And then one day, those things started disappearing. The factory shuts down, the storefront goes empty, the jobs pack up and leave, the kids leave. The town gets just a little quieter every single year. And eventually, the old hardware store becomes yet another Dollar General in a sea of Dollar Generals, which kind of feels like the most American sentence that I've ever said. And look, I'm not pretending every town is perfect. I'm not doing the everything was better back then routine. Every single generation thinks their childhood was the peak of civilization. My grandparents thought rock music was going to destroy society. Turns out, it mostly just gave us Van Halen. But something happened, something changed, and the people living through it noticed, which means the anger I'm seeing, I get it. The frustration, I get it. The feeling that someone took something from you, well, I get that too. What I don't understand is where we keep aiming it. Because every election cycle, someone shows up with the same exact list. It's the immigrants, the gay and trans community, whoever we're supposed to be mad at this week. And every single time I find myself asking the same question. Okay, walk me through the plan. Let's say you're right. Let's say we blame all of them. Then what? Are groceries suddenly cheaper? Did the factory reopen? Did your wages go up? Did your pension come back? Did your electric bill go down? No. Then maybe we're looking at the wrong suspect. Because I think something happened. I think real communities got hurt. I think people got angry, and I think someone showed up and handed a whole lot of good people a map to the wrong house. This is part 3 of How Did We Get Here? This is The Harvest. I'm Nate, and welcome back to another Side Quest Sunday. So let's talk about what actually grew. Now, before someone accuses me of doing the thing all podcasters do, where we make a big claim and then immediately sprint away from it, let's look at the receipts, not vibes or memes or a Facebook post written entirely in capital letters by a guy whose profile picture is a pickup truck. I'm talking actual receipts. Because one thing I've learned getting older is that eventually every idea has to face reality. If a policy works, you should be able to see the results. And if it doesn't, you should be able to see those too. So let's look at what actually grew. Because for 40 years, Americans were told a story. Get a job, work hard, stay loyal to the company, trust the system, prosperity is coming. The rising tide will lift all boats. And after 40 years, I think it's fair to ask a simple question. How's that tide doing? Because from where I'm standing, a whole lot of boats seem to be taking on water. So let's start with the thing everyone can feel, even if they don't know the numbers, because you don't need an economics degree to know something feels off. Hell, you just need to buy groceries, or pay your rent, or look at literally any bill that arrives in your mailbox. Now, here's where the math starts getting weird, and by weird, I mean, hey man, are you sure this isn't a typo? You see, back in 1978, the average CEO made about 30 times what the average worker made. 30 to 1. Now, don't get me wrong, 30 to 1 is already a pretty sweet deal. If we're on the same team and you're making 30 times what I'm making, I'm probably going to have some questions. But okay, 30 to 1. Now, fast forward to today. That number isn't 30 to 1 anymore. It's roughly 344 to 1. Let me repeat myself. 344 to 1. Which is such an absurd number that my brain rejects it on principle. At that point, we're not talking about different floors of the same building. We're talking about different zip codes entirely. Different planets even. Hell, different dimensions. If the average worker makes $50,000 a year, then the CEO is making over $17 million for the same exact company. The same company! You know how every corporate meeting eventually turns into, hey, we're all a family around here. Buddy, one guy is wondering if he can afford eggs, while the other guy has a yacht named Eggs. That is not a family. That's two entirely different realities sharing a parking lot. And here's the thing that fascinates me, because I remember hearing all of this as a kid. I remember hearing that if wealthy people and corporations got tax cuts, they'd invest more, build more, hire more, expand more. The money would flow through the economy. Everyone wins. That was the promise. The money would trickle down. And look, I've waited nearly 40 years. The money appears to have developed a fear of heights. Because what actually happened, the people at the top, they got richer. A lot richer. Corporations became more profitable. Executive compensation exploded. Meanwhile, workers spent decades hearing phrases like cost cutting, restructuring, efficiency, which are corporate terms that roughly translate to, congrats, you're doing the work of 3 people now. And here's where I think people get weird about this conversation, because the second you bring it up, someone assumes you're angry at rich people. And listen, I'm not. If I woke up tomorrow with $1 billion, I'd be unbearable. I'd own a movie theater that only played Terminator 2 Judgment Day. I'd buy Dutch a yard so big he'd need a GPS collar. I'd absolutely become a problem. People have always wanted money. That is not new. What gets me is the promise. Because if you tell me a policy is going to help everybody, and 40 years later, most people feel like they're running faster just to stay in the same place, I think it's fair to ask a question. Did the policy work? Because that's not a partisan question. That's just a math question. And my friends, the math is getting real weird. Steve, what's wrong? Steve is trying to process the CEO pay ratio. Dude, we're all trying to process the CEO pay ratio. Steve says if the average worker makes 50 grand and the CEO makes 17 million, are they even co-workers anymore? And you know what, bud? That's a fantastic question. Because at that point, they're not riding in the same boat. Hell, they're not even in the same ocean. One guy's wondering if he can even afford to take his family to the beach, while the other guy is waving from a yacht named Eggs. Steve says, yeah, that doesn't really sound like a team. And you know what? That's the problem, buddy. Steve says the yacht should be named Trickle Down. Damn it, Steve, that's actually really good. Now, Let's talk about unions, and before anyone immediately has a political reaction, just hang with me for a second, because where I grew up, unions weren't some abstract thing people argued about on television. Union jobs meant someone's mortgage got paid, someone's kid got braces. It meant there was a decent chance your family could survive a bad month without immediately entering a boss battle with the electric company. That's what people are usually talking about when they talk about the good jobs. Not perfect jobs or glamorous jobs, but good jobs, the kind where you could actually build a life. And the thing I think people miss is that unions aren't really about wages, at least not primarily. They're about leverage, because without leverage, you're kind of just asking nicely. Just think about it. If you're negotiating by yourself against a corporation with lawyers, HR departments, consultants, and entire teams of people whose full time job is figuring out how much they can squeeze out of you, that's not really a negotiation. That's you showing up to a tank fight with a stick and then acting surprised when things just didn't go your way. Unions changed that equation because one worker can be replaced, but 1,000 workers, they become a problem. And that's the entire idea. Now, let's look at what happened in the early 1980s. About 20% of American workers belong to a union. Now, fast forward to today, around 10%. That number is cut in half. And before someone says, well, maybe people just stopped wanting unions. Sure, maybe some did. But something else happened too, something very public and loud that sent a clear message. In 1981, air traffic controllers went on strike, and Ronald Reagan fired more than 11,000 of them. Gone. Done. Career over. Now, whether you agree with the strike or disagree with the strike, honestly, is not the point I'm trying to make. The point is that everyone saw it. Every executive, every labor organizer, every worker saw it. And the message was clear. The rules have changed. Now, here's where it gets interesting, because when most people think about unions declining, they think about wages, and sure, that matters. But I think something else disappeared too: a voice, a sense that someone had your back, a feeling that if management made a terrible decision, someone in the room was willing to stand up and say, hey, that's a terrible decision. And once that's gone, the balance starts shifting. Not necessarily overnight or dramatically, just a little bit every year. A little every layoff, a little every plant closure, a little every contract negotiation, until one day you wake up and realize the people making decisions about your town, well, they don't actually live there anymore. Their kids don't even go to school there. They don't shop there or worship there. They don't have to deal with the consequences. And the people left behind, they notice. Because of course they notice. Anyone would. Because if your wages stagnate, if your factory closes, if your town starts hollowing out, eventually you're gonna ask a question. Who did this? And that's where things start getting really interesting. Steve, what you got rattling around in that walnut of yours? Steve says, so the people making the decisions don't actually have to live with the decisions. Not always, dude, no. Steve says, that kind of seems like a design flaw. Buddy, you are going to hate what comes next. Now, while workers were losing leverage, while unions were shrinking, and communities were trying to figure out what the hell was happening, America was being sold yet another idea. A very simple one. The market, it knows best. Leave it alone. Get government out of the way. Trust the process. And look, before anyone starts loading me into a cannon, I like markets. Markets are useful. Competition is useful. Innovation is useful. The problem is that every single time someone tells me a market should just be left completely alone, I eventually discover they're standing next to a gasoline can and a box of matches. Every single time. Because here's the thing no one tells you, the market isn't a magical force of nature. It's people. It's always people. And people, my friends, well, they're weird. People will absolutely do the right thing right up until there's a quarterly earnings report involved. Then things get really interesting. So let's talk about what happened when America started removing some of the guardrails. And yes, I know the phrase financial deregulation sounds like something your accountant falls asleep reading, but stay with me. The first big warning sign was something called the savings and loan crisis, which sounds like the least exciting sequel ever made. But here's the short version. A bunch of financial institutions got more freedom. They started making riskier bets. And those bets, they went bad. Over 1,000 institutions failed. And taxpayers got handed a bill for about $132 billion. And if that sounds familiar, then get used to it, because we're about to discover a pattern. For people who claim to love personal responsibility, corporations sure do become socialists the very second they set something on fire. And I mean every single time. Because then we get Enron in 2001, a company that looked wildly successful from the outside until everyone discovered the books were basically being held together with duct tape and bullshit. Thousands of employees got wrecked, retirement accounts evaporated, executives walked away rich, which is becoming a recurring theme and not a particularly fun one. Then came 2008, and if you're old enough to remember 2008, you probably just made a face. Because everyone remembers 2008. People lost homes, jobs, their savings, businesses, entire communities got hammered. And when the dust settled, the banks got bailed out. Now, to be fair, maybe some of that bailout was necessary. That is a legitimate argument. Reasonable people can disagree. What people can't reasonably argue is that no one noticed, because people absolutely noticed. They noticed who got rescued, who got left behind, who kept the bonuses, and who lost their house. And after enough years of watching that happen, people start getting angry. Again, that's the part I understand. If you've spent decades being told trust the system, the market, the experts, and then every time something goes wrong, the bill somehow ends up in your mailbox, yeah, you're probably gonna get a little salty. Honestly, I'd be kind of worried if you weren't. Because here's the thing, the anger makes sense, the frustration makes sense, the feeling that someone is getting away with something, that makes total sense too. What happens next? That's the part that keeps me up at night. This episode of the Average Joe Nerdcast is brought to you by The Wrong Target. Are your constituents upset? Do they have legitimate economic grievances? Are they starting to ask uncomfortable questions? The Wrong Target can help. Simply identify the actual source of the problem and then blame someone else. The Wrong Target is perfect for factory closures, stagnant wages, disappearing pensions, and any situation where voters are getting dangerously close to connecting dots. Our most popular packages include the Immigrant Special. Blame foreign workers for decisions made in a boardroom 3 states away. The Culture War Bundle. Keep voters focused on bathrooms while their retirement account gets mugged in an alley. The Welfare Recipient Deluxe. Redirect anger away from corporate welfare and toward people who can't afford lawyers. Side effects may include arguing with your cousin on Facebook for 6 consecutive years, mistaking a drag queen for a Fortune 500 CEO, and the uncontrollable urge to scream at a teenager while a hedge fund quietly buys your entire neighborhood. Ask your political consultant if the wrong target is right for you. The wrong target. We don't solve the problems. We just help you blame someone else for them. What now, Steve? Steve says, so every time they remove the guardrails, something caught on fire? Not every time, dude. Just enough times to make me a little nervous. Now, here's where everything comes together, because up to this point, nothing I've described is fake. The factory closures are real. The wage stagnation is real. The layoffs are real. The wealth gap is very real. The hollowed out towns, they're real too. And that anger, it's tangibly real. And I need to keep saying that because it's important. The anger, the frustration, the feeling that something was taken from you, that's all real. And that's why this works, because no one had to invent the wound. The wound was already there. And that's where Edward Bernays comes walking right back into the story. Because back in part 1, we talked about something that sounded ridiculous until you started seeing it everywhere. You don't create the emotion. You just redirect it. That's the trick. You don't have to manufacture anger. You just have to aim it. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it, because suddenly a whole lot of things started making sense. Let's say a factory closes. Now you've got hundreds of people asking the same exact question. Who did this? And there are two possible answers. One answer is complicated. It's shareholder incentives, executive compensation, trade policy, corporate consolidation, boardroom decisions, global labor markets, tax policy, 1,000 different moving pieces. It's complicated. And the other answer is those people over there. Now, guess which one fits on a bumper sticker? Guess which one fits in a 30-second political ad? Guess which one gets repeated over and over and over until people stop asking follow-up questions? And here's the part that drives me insane, because every single election cycle, someone rolls into town with the same list. Immigrants, the LGBTQIA plus community, whoever we're supposed to be mad at this time. And every single time I find myself asking that same question. Okay, guys, walk me through the plan. Let's say you're right. Let's say we blame immigrants. Let's say we blame the LGBT community. Let's say every culture war issue magically goes your way tomorrow. Cool. Are my groceries cheaper? Did the factory down the road reopen? Did your wages go up? Did your pension come back? Did your electric bill go down? No? Then why are we standing in this aisle arguing with each other while someone else is emptying the cash register? Because that's the part that does not make sense to me. The trans kid did not close down the factory. The gay couple didn't outsource the jobs. And the immigrant family didn't approve the stock buybacks. And yet somehow they're the people we're yelling at. What are we doing? And before someone gets mad, I'm not saying culture doesn't matter. Culture matters. Values matter. Communities matter. Of course they do. But every minute spent screaming at someone who has absolutely nothing to do with your economic situation is a minute you're not looking at the people who do. And that right there, that's the move. That's the whole move. Not a new move, not even a clever move, not original either. Just an effective one. You take a population that's hurting, hand them a map, and make sure the map leads to the wrong house. Because if they ever show up at the right house, some very powerful people are going to have a really bad day. What now? Steve says if they keep giving people the wrong suspect, Has anyone checked the guy handing out suspect sketches? Steve, dude, that's the episode. This episode of the Average Joe Nerdcast is also brought to you by the Culture War. Are voters beginning to ask questions about wages, healthcare, housing, retirement? Well, the Culture War can help. Why discuss who has the money when you can argue about who has the values? The Culture War now comes with 24-hour news coverage, algorithmic amplification, and a free smartphone app that guarantees you'll never go more than 12 minutes without being furious. Popular features include bathroom legislation, maximum outrage, minimum economic impact, flag controversies, turn patriotism into a team sport. Now everyone can lose together. The War on Christmas, available annually, just like fruitcake. And best of all, while everyone is arguing about symbols, no one is comparing paychecks. The Culture War. Because if voters start comparing paychecks, someone might get uncomfortable. And this is where it stops being just history, because I can talk about Bernays, I can talk about Ronald Reagan, I can talk about unions and deregulation and economic policy until we're all bored to tears. But eventually, I have to talk about home. Because I'm from South Central Kentucky, I've spent my entire life around the kinds of communities we've been talking about. The kinds of places where everyone knows everyone. The kinds of places where if your truck breaks down, someone shows up. You might not even like each other, but they're still showing up. That, my friends, is small town America. And I've watched a lot of those communities change. And not overnight or dramatically, just a little bit every single year. The factory down the road closes, the jobs leave, the kids move away, Main Street gets quieter, the Dollar General gets bigger, which honestly feels like the official bird of rural America at this point. And through all of it, I've watched people get angry, and not internet angry or cable news angry, real angry. The kind of anger that comes from working and still falling behind. The kind of anger that comes from looking at your parents' life and realizing they somehow had access to things that feel completely out of reach now. The kind of anger that comes from feeling like the rules changed halfway through the game. And here's the part I need people to hear. I don't think those people are stupid. And I don't think they're evil. And I don't think they're broken. Because a lot of those people are my people. Some are friends, some are neighbors, some are family. Hell, some of them helped raise me. My dad believed things I would eventually question. That doesn't make him a bad man, just makes him human. Because the thing I've learned doing this series is that propaganda doesn't work because people are stupid. Propaganda works because people are just people. It starts with something real, fear, loss, frustration, anger. Then it gives those feelings a direction. And once I understood that, a lot of things started making more sense. Because now when I hear someone blaming immigrants for everything, I don't hear a villain. I hear someone trying to explain a problem. I just think they were handed the wrong explanation. When I hear someone blaming gay people for everything, I don't hear a cartoon bad guy. I hear someone who's angry and trying to make sense of a changing world. I just think someone gave them the wrong map. And before anyone gets too comfortable, that doesn't make me smarter than them. I've believed things that weren't true. You've probably believed things that weren't true. Don't even lie. We all have. Everyone listening to this show right now has believed something that turned out to be complete nonsense. That's all a part of being human. The difference is whether you're willing to revisit it, whether you're willing to stop and ask, wait a minute, how do I know that's true? Which, now that I think about it, is probably something my dad accidentally taught me. And you know what? That's the weirdest part. Because the more I've worked through this series, the less angry I've become at the people. And the angrier I've become at the machinery. Because people, we're messy, we're complicated, We're just trying to survive. People are trying to make sense of the world. But the machinery knows exactly what it's doing. And that's what scares me. Because the machinery didn't stop. It just got better, faster, smarter, more efficient. Bernays would have looked at modern social media the way I look at a perfectly cooked steak. Pure admiration. No notes. Because just imagine being a propaganda guy in 1928 and someone shows you an algorithm that can tell you what people fear, what makes them angry, what keeps them engaged, what they'll share, what they'll fight about. 24 hours a day, free of charge. Edward Bernays would have exploded. He would have just ascended directly into the heavens. Dude, seriously, Steve, what? Steve says, so propaganda got an update? Yeah, I mean, pretty much. Steve says, well, that's concerning. You know what, dude? You are catching on way too fast today. So where do I land on all of this? Honestly, not where I expected to. Because when I started pulling on this thread, I thought I was learning about Edward Bernays. Then I thought I was learning about Ronald Reagan. Then I thought I was learning about economics. Turns out I was learning about anger. Who has it? Why they have it? And what happens when someone gives it direction. Because after everything we've talked about today, the wealth gap, the disappearing unions, the deregulation disasters, the factory closures, the hollowed out communities, the one thing I keep coming back to is this. The grievance, it's real. The target, it's wrong. And that distinction matters. Because if you've spent 40 years watching jobs disappear, watching wages stagnate, watching your community struggle, watching the cost of everything go up, except your paycheck, yeah, you're probably going to be angry. Honestly, I'd be a little worried if you weren't. The question isn't whether people are angry. The question is where the anger goes. Because somewhere along the way, a lot of Americans got handed a suspect. A very convenient suspect. A suspect who didn't close down the factories, didn't cut the pensions, didn't ship the jobs overseas, didn't write the tax code, didn't approve the stock buybacks, and didn't collect the bonus. But somehow ended up standing trial anyway. And that's the part I can't stop thinking about. Because if someone robs your house and then spends 40 years convincing you the wrong guy did it, eventually you stop looking for the thief. You start arguing with your neighbors. And while you're arguing, the thief is still in your house, still taking stuff, still getting richer, still hoping no one notices. Come on, guys, what are we doing? And here's the thing, I don't hate the people who got handed the wrong suspects, because I know too many of them. I grew up with them. I'm related to some of them. Hell, I've been one of them at different points in my life. What I hate is the machinery. The machinery that takes real pain, real loss, real fear, real frustration, and turns it into a product. The machinery that keeps people angry enough to watch, but never informed enough to understand. The machinery that profits every single time we look at each other instead of looking up. Because once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's been the strangest part of this entire series. Not discovering the machinery, discovering how often it works. And unfortunately, the story doesn't stop here. Because eventually the machinery leaves the television and starts showing up in the real world in matching outfits, with matching signs, marching through communities that look a whole lot like mine. Communities that were already hurting, communities that were already angry, communities that had already been handed a suspect. And when I saw it, I realized something. The harvest isn't the anger. The harvest is what grows when the anger gets pointed somewhere long enough. And that's where I'm going next. 15 minutes down the road. And trust me, it's going to get weird. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this edition of Side Quest Sunday. If you enjoyed the episode, follow the show wherever you're listening. Leave a rating, leave a review. Trust me when I say it helps more than people realize. And then come find us over in the lobby. That's the Average Joe Nerdcast private Facebook group. I'll drop a link to the group in the show notes, or you can head straight over to Facebook and in the search bar, just type Average Joe Nerdcast the lobby, and you will find the page. And if Facebook isn't your thing, the lobby Discord is officially live, which means we've successfully created our own little corner of the internet. A dangerous amount of power has been entrusted to nerds. So if you want to talk video games, movies, TV, comics, podcast episodes, share memes, or just hang out with other average Joes, then please come join us. The lobby, it's always open. Link will be in the show notes. And unlike most of the internet, we're at least attempting to act like we were raised properly. And this week, I want to ask you something. Not a political question, but a human one. What's something you believed when you were younger that you eventually changed your mind about? And not because someone screamed at you, or because someone shamed you, or because someone called you stupid, but because you followed the evidence somewhere unexpected. Drop all your answers over in the thread, because I genuinely would love to hear it. And one more thing before I get out of here. We're getting close to episode 100, which is absolutely ridiculous. When I started this whole thing, I was just sitting in my living room talking into a microphone, hoping maybe someone besides my wife would listen. And now here we are. So I need your help. For episode 100, I want to hear from you. How did you find the show? What's been your favorite episode? Which episode hit you the hardest? What's been the funniest moment? The weirdest moment? The moment that made you yell at your phone, computer, or whatever cursed device you're currently listening on? And what do you want to hear us cover in the future? Drop everything over in the lobby. Or send me an email at averagejoenerdcast@gmail.com. However you want to do it. Because episode 100 shouldn't just be me looking back. It should be all of us looking back. And now before I get out of here for real, quick shout out to my player 2. Thank you for listening to me turn yet another historical rabbit hole into a conspiracy board covered in red string. You're still the best thing that's ever happened to me. And this show. I've been Nate, and this is Average Joe Nerdcast. Stay gold, nerd bold, and remember, if someone is working really hard to tell you who to hate, it might be worth asking what they're hoping you don't notice. I'll catch you on the next one.
Game over.